Good morning and welcome to the Evolve to Win show. This is the #1 rated show on Facebook Live. Did you know that?
#1 rated.
It's soon to be. It's soon to be.
Sure. Good morning and happy Monday. We are going to talk to you today about meaningful conversations. And it's just absolutely critical in being a leader that you stop saying that you're too busy to have meaningful conversations. Because when you're not having meaningful conversations, you're not building the trust that's necessary to actually have influence, which is everything that leadership is all about. So welcome to those who are just joining in. Thanks for being with us today. Paul, why is it that you have such a strong opinion about meaningful conversations?
Well, I think, just this weekend, having family in town, and we had a little bit of a get together and a party, but, we got time to spend. We spent time with family, but it was kind of an isolated time where we just got to sit and talk and really start to have conversations that we'd never had before. And it really made me start to think about, well, why, in the workplace, is this happening? And I highly doubt that it's happening at the level that it should be. And I think, as we finished up those conversations with family, it was enlightening. It was like, oh my God, we didn't know so much about this particular person. This is a family member. So imagine what's happening in business. And so the relationships that people have, especially, the leaders, and having to build the trust with their employees' direct reports, how important is it to have those meaningful conversations? And when I say meaningful, like not just know maybe a little bit about what they do, but what are their hobbies? What are their interests? who are their kids? What are things that they like to do that get them excited and passionate about living, Yeah,
it's like really what makes them tick, right? Getting to the core of that. So just to share about our weekend this weekend, it was actually really tremendous. We didn't just have a little get together. We did something that was absolutely monumental for our family. So my grandmother and my grandfather were born one day apart. So they were literally one day from each other. January 18th and January 19th, 1918 was the day that each of them were born. So they would have just celebrated their 100th birthdays. And so what we did is we planned a gathering with all of our immediate family, and we got together on Saturday and we celebrated 100 years. We celebrated who they were and honored them. And we did something actually really extraordinary. I had met a gentleman by the name of Colonel Tim Cole a few years back as part of my mastermind that I was part of out of Dallas, Texas. And Colonel Cole shared with me during our conversations about this passion that he had for honoring veterans. And so this whole thing transpired a few years ago where he actually gave me the idea to learn about and celebrate my grandfather's World War II record. Now, none of us in the family knew anything about his record other than the fact that he was in the Battle of the Bulge. He was the communications officer at the Bridge of Remagen, which was one of the major strategies that ended the war much sooner than it would have ended. But Colonel Cole actually studied and researched my grandfather's war record for over 6 months. He produced this shadow box full of all of the medals that he had won. And he gave us a timeline and showed us a map of where his unit went and what he did and why he received so many honors and even individual honors. And it was just the most fascinating. There was not a dry eye in the house. I mean, we were all just completely blown away by the true war hero that my grandfather was. So we had conversations that evening that none of us had ever had during his lifetime or since. And we got to really appreciate and honor both he and my grandmother for being who they were and creating the family they created. So that's a very personal story about having meaningful conversation. But what we really recognize is that, in leadership in general, if you want to have influence in a relationship, you've got to have trust. And there is no other better way to build trust than to have these conversations that are deeper than surface level.
Yeah, and some of the best leaders, smart leaders, have learned how to engage with their employees with person-to-person conversations. So really getting to know them and spending the time with them. And this is where the whole 80-20, remember the 2 ears, 1 mouth for leaders. If you find yourself as a leader and you're talking all the time, you're the one that's leading the conversation. It's one thing to have a conversation with another. A meaningful conversation would be more like you speaking 20% of the time with real valued questions and then listening 80% of the time. Because people want to be heard. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
And I'm glad you brought up this whole idea of listening, because when you think about having meaningful conversations, people think about conversations a lot of times and think about, well, what am I going to say? But to have a meaningful conversation, you should really be thinking about, what am I going to ask? And asking questions of someone that really uncover who they are at their core. So this, when you think about active listening, it is one of the top skill sets that any leader can develop. When you think about the frustrations that people have around leadership and the interactions and communications, one of the biggest complaints that I hear from people who we work with in senior leadership positions is that they don't feel like their boss listens to them. And you think about the impact in that. And it's not, my boss doesn't listen to me because he or she doesn't care. Usually my boss doesn't listen to me because they're so flippin' busy that they can't take the time to sit down and actually truly interact and actually be that active listener. And I think this is one of the challenges that we really face in our super fast-paced business environment, is making the time to sit down and to just put everything else on hold for a moment so that we can get present and in the moment in a conversation and not be so rushed into that next meeting, that next appointment all the time. So what that requires then is truly scheduling time and having that one-on-one interaction. And I think not enough leaders are doing this consistently enough. So what happens is when you have that one-to-one time, typically in a business environment, it is so singularly focused on working in the business, right? It's so focused on what we need to do, task-oriented, all about the do, instead of really thinking about, who do I need to be in this conversation? And how can I actually engage with somebody in a way that is meaningful and deep? Because every time you walk into any interaction and you create that intention of being present and you create that intention of truly actively listening to someone, you are absolutely shifting the level of relationship, the level of trust with that individual.
Yeah, so you may be saying, well, you know what? I like the idea of having a conversation with some of my direct reports, but what if they start getting into things that I'm feeling a little uncomfortable about? Maybe they start getting to family situations. Maybe it's getting much more personal. And maybe they start complaining to you. And now you're like, oh boy, why do I want to take this on? Like I didn't want to hear this. This is a great opportunity to teach them the on the court lesson, the on and off the court, which is really about taking personal responsibility. So if you get somebody that's complaining to you in these conversations, it's a good opportunity for you to really become and step up to be the leader and teach them the lesson around how to take personal responsibility. So Heather, do you want to teach that?
Let's do it.
So why don't you coach me through that?
Okay.
So I'm complaining about my wife because this is just a horrible weekend and my kids are terrible. And I just, I'm
well, it's me. Okay. So I want to give you a model.
I have a lot of complaints.
Yes, and I'm really sorry about that. I have a model that I want to share with you that really is going to give you this distinction of what it looks like to take personal responsibility for all of your results in your life, your thinking, your actions, your results.
Okay.
And if you were to take complete and total personal responsibility, we're going to say that that would be on the court. And of course, I'm going to draw this out for him so that he can see what on the court looks like, but I need to have a pen that works, and that's going to make it easier. So we're going to draw something out.
You're going to have to write it backwards because it'll show up backwards.
The court. Well, they're just going to have to work with us on this. So what you're going to do is, can you see this? It's going to be backwards on the court.
No, it is. It shows up.
On the court is on one side, okay? On the court equals personal responsibility, okay? That is literally taking personal responsibility for everything in your life, all of your results, all of your interactions. You get to own your piece of those. And then there's a way of being that's called off the court. And off the court is a completely different place. And somewhere, somewhere in this off the court thinking, okay, you got that. Somewhere in this off the court, you have negativity. Okay? Negativity in any
So if I'm
area.
complaining, am I being negative?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So any complaints that you have.
Because it kind of feels good every once in a while.
Well, you think it feels good, but the reality is there's absolutely zero power in being off the court. So think about it. When you're in a place of negativity, if you're in a place of having complaints, maybe you're blaming someone or something for the reasons that you couldn't get something done. Maybe you are making excuses about why you weren't able to have the results that you wanted to have. Maybe you're procrastinating. Maybe you're rationalizing. I mean, everything that's negative belongs.
What if I'm trying to get
court.
you to buy in with me on it?
Well, then you're trying to get me into collusion with you. Okay. And collusion is not a great place to be either.
Okay.
So a lot of times what people do is they have a complaint, but they won't take it directly to the person who they want to complain to or who can do something about it. Instead, they go and complain to someone else about this person and what they've done. All of that is off the court behavior. It's a negative place. It has you disempowered. That's different from being on the court, which is taking responsibility. If I have a complaint and I want to get on the court with it, I address it. I address it either directly with the person who can do something about it, or I let it go. Sometimes you just have to be willing to let it go. So it's really making the decision, what do I need to do in the moment in light of my circumstances to get back on the court and take personal responsibility?
Okay, so if you're a leader and you're uncomfortable having personal conversations with people because you don't want to get into the whole, maybe somebody's going to open up a little too much and start to get complaining a lot more about their family and stuff like that, and you're kind of like, oh boy, I opened Pandora's box. I don't know what to do now. This is a great opportunity to take them and teach them something about taking personal responsibility and see how it lands, right?
Absolutely. So one of the reasons that people get concerned about having personal conversations is that they are going to open up that door to listening to all of someone's issues and challenges and negativity. And quite frankly, if you don't provide somebody the opening to hear them and get them and understand what their challenges are, they're still going to have those challenges. They're just going to get derailed by them. So you might as well give a forum for someone to share if they've got off the court thinking and they've got these excuses and they're blaming someone or something for why they can't get their job done. Wouldn't it be wonderful to help break them free of that way of thinking?
So what's the lesson, though, on that?
So you break them free in that way of thinking by really focusing on the fact that there is a line here in the middle, right? Where is that line? There it is. Right. So there's a line in the middle there between on the court, off the court, and it is a very specific line, and it basically is a line of choice. You have to make a choice whether to stay off the court or whether to get on the court and take personal responsibility.
So wait a minute. So you're telling me that I have a choice? It just doesn't happen habitually and automatically?
It probably does happen habitually because you're not making the choice. So let me be very clear about this. We don't go into a place of negativity because we want to be there. I mean, you may think you do, but you don't. Who wants to be in a place of negativity? That does not feel good. What happens, though, is we get pulled off the court during any given circumstance where we're encountering something negative. That's what human nature does for us. It doesn't take any effort. It doesn't take any thought to go negative in light of a negative circumstance. That's natural. That's normal. That's what happens if you're not otherwise consciously choosing. So what happens is when you get stuck in a negative space is because you've fallen off the court because your environment has taken you there in some way, shape, or form. But be very clear, you let your environment take you there. You have every opportunity to choose to get back on the court and take personal responsibility in light of the circumstances.
And so now that I've learned this, I now have a choice whether or not to stay in that negative place or choose to take personal responsibility for it.
That's correct. And it doesn't mean that you're always going to make the right choice, but now that you have an awareness and you have a model and you can look at two different places to be, one of the indicators, so you see, the thing is, we stay off the court. We go off the court automatically because of circumstances. Sure. We stay off the court because we fail to recognize that we have a choice in the matter. We fail to recognize that we can choose at any moment in time to get back into the place of personal responsibility. So think about it this way. There's only one thing, if one thing only, that we have full control over, and that's the way we respond to any given situation. Most people don't respond, they react, meaning they just go with wherever the situation takes them. But you have the opportunity to respond, which takes reflection, which takes personal choice about, okay, so how do I want to respond to this situation? Mm-hmm. That I always have control over. So it's about taking and making that choice. Now, as I said, people go off the court because of their environment, because of their circumstances. They stay off the court because of a lack of awareness that they're there and they have a choice in the matter. So how do you become aware? This is one of the key points if you're going to coach somebody on this. You become aware based on your emotions.
So when I'm complaining and I'm upset, I don't necessarily feel really good. It may feel good for me, but I know deep down that that's not the way I should be feeling. Right. But when I take personal responsibility, there's empowerment there. There's a feeling, a sense of being in control.
Yes.
And so that's the difference, right?
Yeah. If you're feeling disempowered, if you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling jealous, if you're feeling any of those negative emotions, that is your indicator that you're off the court in some aspect of your life. So if you feel that way, you just have to ask yourself the question, what would I need to do to take personal responsibility in this moment?
So bringing that back to, and the reason we got into that particular lesson was because
you brought us there.
Well, and I think that what we were talking about was that leaders sometimes shy away from those difficult conversations and don't want to get too personal with their direct reports employees because they may fall into that complaining and learning more about things, the too much information, right? Mm-hmm. And this is something you can use during those conversations to really help somebody gain some personal responsibility. The great thing about on the court, off the court lesson is if you teach it, once they understand that they have a choice and they really get it, there's no going back. It's sort of like learning how to ride a bike, right? You can try and forget it, but you will always know deep down subconsciously that you do have the choice to take whatever situation you have and that you're in to personal responsibility and not be blaming it on others. For example, quickly, I was late because of traffic, right? How many people use that today?
Probably lots, especially during season in Southwest Florida. Right. That's a guarantee.
Is there anything that's, when somebody tells you that, you're like, oh boy, just don't even tell me that just tell me that you were late.
Just apologize.
Right? But if somebody's thinking that and they're saying, you know what, I really was late because the traffic was bad, but they're not going to say it to you. They're just going to say, oh, I was late. But they know deep down that they're blaming somebody else, something else, for the reason that they aren't responsible for their own lives. That is the difference. So gaining that knowledge and understanding that it's not the traffic, it's not anything other than what happened to you, no matter what happened, because it just is what it is.
Well, and I think too, when we make excuses, it really is disempowering, right? You're basically saying, I had no control over the matter.
Right.
I couldn't have left earlier to avoid the traffic. I was not responsible. So,
and it's hard for people to take that on because they can truly say, well, you know what, I left 20 minutes early, and it's a 10-minute ride, but there was a big accident. There was a major accident, and I had to take a detour and I had to go, and it ended up taking 25 minutes. I was 5 minutes late to well, it all sounds great. The story's good, right? But if you truly take full responsibility for your own life, it is what it is. You say you're sorry and you move on, and no excuses around it. No blaming something else for it. Mm-hmm. So let's just move on.
I want to go back to the concept. I mean, we're really talking about having meaningful conversations as a way to really break through as a leader, build a better relationship, build better trust, so that ultimately you have the kind of influence that you want to have as a leader. So I want to give a perfect example. We had a client meeting this morning. And this client is really super, super successful. She's built a great team. She has a great company. And she was talking to me about some of the next level growth areas. And there were some real opportunities for her to have meaningful conversation with people in her office. Now, this particular woman, it likes to shy away from anything that looks like conflict, smells like conflict, could be disguised as conflict. So she just doesn't want it. And she has some family members who work with her in her business. And so those are even more difficult conversations. So even though they're not doing exactly what they should be doing in their role, she backs off on having the very direct and very meaningful conversations with them because she wants to protect that relationship. So all of you know, and she knows very well too, that that's not actually helping her family members. It's not helping the organization. And if you are allowing someone to be less than they can be, right? If you're just being nice to someone and allowing them to be less than their potential, you're not truly being a leader, right? You're not developing them to tap into their strengths so that they can be the best contribution that they can be. So,
and that is a great point. And that is another leadership conversation that probably isn't being had enough, which is the potential conversation where sitting down with somebody and saying, I see amazing potential in you, and I want to help you get there. Do you know how many people just want somebody to just believe in them? Because most people don't, right? Most people don't have somebody that really steps up and takes on and believes in them.
Yeah, I mean, think about the people who have done that for you in your life, who have really recognized and said, I see something in you. I see something so amazing in you. And they start to describe for you who they think you are. We don't do that enough. You know, we sometimes get hung up on the day-to-day and what's happening and what's not happening. But what about actually looking for and finding the potential, not just finding it and thinking it, but actually saying it out loud? That's a really meaningful conversation that not enough people are having. Setting expectations are also, that's a big piece of having meaningful conversations. You know, one of the biggest letdowns that we have in life is that we have expectations of someone, but they're unfulfilled. Now, a lot of times we have not even communicated the expectations that we have. So there's no wonder that those expectations are unfulfilled. We're not working on helping someone live up to our expectations, right?
Got it. Yeah. And I also think that, so the reason that the leaders are so busy, so I'm sorry, but I hear so much, and trust me, I've said it myself, where people are saying, I'm too busy. I think I'm too busy is like the new catchphrase for everything, right? I'm just too busy. Everybody's so busy. And leaders especially are saying, I'm too busy because I'm doing the work. I'm doing my job. I'm doing in the whirlwind of my work and my job, doing everything that I need to do. I don't have time to have these conversations with my direct reports employees. I just don't have time for it.
Right. I have more to do than time to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just too busy.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, if they were investing more time with their teams and they were investing more times with those personal relationships, building the trust, which is building their leadership, which is building the influence for them, that they could be offloading and delegating a lot of the work that they're saying they're too busy with and be spending way more time with the direct reports employees.
Yeah. I mean, really, as a leader, your number one role is to get the most out of your team, right? That's our number one role as leaders, is to help everyone who works with and for us to tap into their strengths, develop their potential, develop their skill set, and grow into their role so that they produce at a higher level. So if the majority of my focus is on developing my team, my team really should be taking care of most of what needs to happen in any given department.
Right. And so kind of winding this up, I think one last thing, and I thought it was an interesting statistic, and that is, so if you're a leader that you're doing remote leadership, so you have teams that are outside and you're having to get on Skype or Zoom or something like that, where you're doing a teleconference, the statistic was done, it was done by Cisco, that if the screen, so this is, try and imagine this, so you know how you see on Skype or whatever, the person's face and maybe it's only that big, and you could make it full screen. Well, they say if a person's face on the screen is 80% less of their actual face, that there is a large diminished response to that person. So what I'm saying is that when you get on and ask, when you're speaking to somebody, to put each other in full face, right? Full face mode, so that our faces actually look the same size, that communication happens at a much higher level. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Move your face all the way forward in this.
Yeah, I mean, don't scare people.
No, but I thought that was a really interesting statistic. So basically, you have to make your face at least 80% of its actual size to have the true impact of a face-to-face conversation. So it's really doing like the full screen mode and talking to someone as though they almost see you, the actual virtual size of your face. Yeah. So that is more impactful and powerful. So let's just wrap it up. I think that the idea of having meaningful conversation, of course, there is the 80-20 rule that Paul brought up, 80% listening, 20% talking. By virtue of that 80-20 rule, it means that in that 20% of the time you're talking, mostly you're asking questions, right? And you're
open-ended questions too.
Open-ended questions, the kinds of questions that allow someone to just expand on what they're doing. So let me give you one quick example of a question that you should ask everyone who works with and for you as a potentially very deep and meaningful conversation. I love this question. I learned it from one of my mentors, John Molidor, who's the former president of National Speakers Association. He starts off a group meeting by asking the question, tell me something about your childhood that has had a meaningful impact on who you are today. So I think that's a super cool question. You talk about a wide open question to just learn about somebody and what shaped them as a human being. So they might tell you something about a family member or something about an incident they had when they were younger. But it's incredible how much you can learn about somebody when you start to ask those deep and meaningful conversations. Now, by the way, the other opportunity to really get into deep and meaningful conversations, especially if you're in a position of authority, is to be willing to be vulnerable enough to share that same kind of information about you, so that you allow people to know you at more than just a surface level.
So stop being so busy and start having these meaningful conversations with people, learning more about them, because trust is the foundation of leadership. And if you have trust, you become a stronger leader, a better leader. And then from there, from leadership is influence. You will have a much higher level of influence with people. And so that's really the lesson today on Evolve to Win Facebook Live, the #1 Facebook Live in the world, soon to be.
It was super great to have you guys with us today. Thanks for joining in. We always love to see you, and feel free to leave us a comment or give us any ideas, questions that you've asked to people before that have been phenomenal conversation starters for meaningful conversation. You can always visit us at heatherchristie.com and look forward to connecting you on other areas of social media if we're not already connected. And also, if you found this interesting and you know of a leader that would like to learn a little bit more about having meaningful conversations, please share this with them. Sounds good. Everybody, have a great day.
Bye now. Oh, I can't find the off button.
Here, I can do it.